President Trump's effort to exclude undocumented immigrants from the census count. A federal court in California ruled today the president's order is unconstitutional and violates census laws. President Trump issued the order back in July. The census is used to determine each state's share of congressional seats, and it's included both citizens and non-citizens since the first national count. One of several wildfires burning across Colorado spread to nearly 200 square miles overnight. Officials say the East Troublesome Fire is now the fourth largest in state history. The fire started off at 30 square miles before exploding in size this morning. It forced an entire town to evacuate and Rocky Mountain National Park to close. And Moderna has reached a big milestone in developing its coronavirus vaccine. The company said today it's enrolled the 30,000 participants it needs for its phase 3 trial. All volunteers have received their first dose of the vaccine, and most have received the second shot too. Moderna says it could ask the FDA for authorization to put the vaccine on the market in December. Coming up, Newsy's James Packard looks at the issues voters say are the most important as the countdown to the election continues. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newsy Reports. I'm Jay Struberg. We're just hours away from the second presidential debate, and Newsy's James Packard is following the polls. James, the election is so close now. What are some of the key issues voters say they care about the most?
Well, you know, it's sort of reflected in the reaction to the first and only prior presidential debate we saw between these two. There was a lot of disgust, quite frankly, at how chaotic and unproductive it was. And I think that reflects a hunger in the American electorate for a more civil, a more constructive conversation about the policies that impact our lives, not the personal jabs or the personal scandals but the policies that come back to the American family's kitchen table. I want to play for you a little piece of conversation we had with a voter named Robbie Sanchez. She's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She's voting for the president in person on Election Day. But I put to her a question about unity. Listen to this. Whether it's President Trump or Joe Biden, Robbie, what would you need to see from them to unify the country?
Right now, one of the biggest things that we really need is economic. We need stimulus for people like myself that are furloughed. And there are, especially down here being in Florida, we are a huge tourism. We have the airlines, we have all the ships, as well as a lot of hotels and parks.
So people hungry for more unity, and when you ask them what is the policy that would drive that unity, they talk about the economy. Probably not surprising, but when the president's support on the economy is starting to slip, he's going to be probably trying to throw a lot of lines out there about the promises he's made and the promises he's still going to make to try to rebound the economy. The V-shaped recovery, he calls it, not something we've totally seen come to fruition yet.
Yeah, and his numbers on the economy, for as divided as the country is, were pretty good right before the pandemic hit, and obviously COVID's had a big impact on that. Let's talk about the issues, though. What are driving support for Joe Biden? Which issues are driving support for the president?
Yeah, you know, so I mentioned broadly the president is losing some support on the economy, which was the one thing where he was really strongly leading Joe Biden, and now it seems that is starting to slip a little bit. But in terms of the key voters here, the people who have not yet made up their minds, for instance, or the people who are moderates, maybe still seriously considering either President Trump or Joe Biden, the things that drive them in Joe Biden's direction tend to be things like climate change, the coronavirus response, and race relations. Well, those are all on the debate topic list for tonight, which won't necessarily be good for the president. Again, another reason why the president is likely to try to inject some things in there about the economy. You'll also probably hear him talk about Hunter Biden, about the Supreme Court, about gun rights, etc. Jay, those are the things that bode well for him.
Yeah, those could be the issues, but it could go any direction knowing based on the past debate. James Packard, thank you. Newsy's team of reporters is following everything surrounding tonight's debate and the home stretch of the 2020 election. President Trump and Joe Biden are in Nashville tonight. They will share the debate stage starting at 9 Eastern. That's a look at it. You can watch tonight's debate live with no interruptions on Newsy. Our special coverage continues in just a few minutes on Newsy Tonight with Chance Seals. Again, we'll have straightforward reporting with no opinions, and we'll get to hear from voters like you. What are you looking for in the next president? James will have more from our People Not Pundits panels right here on Newsy. You won't want to miss this. You get to hear from voters just like you instead of all the noise you hear on other networks. Stick around. More on Newsy comes up at the top of the hour.
want your children to grow up in a free nation where they can speak their minds and practice their religion and live by their values, then you must defeat Sleepy Joe Biden and the radical left.
So much is at stake for this nation. The very soul of the nation is at stake. Folks, as my coach used to say in college, it's go time.
It's the final toe-to-toe before Election Day. Joe Biden, President Trump meet for an in-person debate with new rules and old grudges. The issues, the allegations, and what to expect without the spin. That's our promise on this high-stakes night now on Newsy. Plus, a big rule change following that anything goes event last month.
Well, I think the mute is very unfair, but that's my life. In the meantime, that's the White House standing behind me, right?
How will the so-called mute button work? How will it be received? And as we always do it here on Newsy, we're shunning the spin masters, instead inviting on real people to share their real perspectives on the issues that matter most to them. People, not pundits. James Packard brings us the latest installment. Newsy's special coverage of 2020's final debate night starts now. Good Thursday evening, I'm Chance Seals in Washington. It's here, the final chance to win over voters who may still be undecided. Joe Biden and President Trump will take to the debate stage one last time, and there's a lot to talk about. You're looking live at Belmont University right here. We're going to show you this is in Nashville, playing host to the last debate before Election Day. There were supposed to be 3 in all. In the end, there were 2, and this is it. Now, just 12 days away is Election Day. At the moment, President Trump trails in most national and battleground polls. How will he and Joe Biden spend their final time in front of so many voters tonight? We're going to bring it to you live, uninterrupted, of course, and no spin. Let's get to the ground, though, in Music City tonight. Alex Miller is there. Alex, could you just set the stage for what we can expect?
Well, Chance, there have been surrogates buzzing around here all day long. You can tell that both sides are anxious to get this evening underway and, frankly, get it over with. There's a lot riding on this, not because of necessarily what people are hoping to hear from the candidates, but from both sides. It will be important to see if either of them make any missteps, whether it's Joe Biden making a gaffe or President Trump interrupting and not laying out the vision for the future for his next 4 years. And so on the ground tonight, you can tell that people are excited, but we're really only 12 days away, so it's also excitement to get to Election Day.
Alex, we're going to get to the Biden campaign, which you cover in just a moment, but I want to bring in now Willie James Inman, who covers the Trump campaign. Willie, tonight, the Trump strategy, is he still trying to throw Biden off his game, force a flub? What's the deal?
Well, Chance, we certainly know the president likes to operate off the cuff, and that's certainly something that he could potentially do. But reportedly, the president and his advisors are telling him that he needs to be more measured. He needs to not interrupt Joe Biden as much as he did last time around. We saw that very chaotic debate. But one of the things I anticipate that could happen potentially tonight is the president is going to perhaps talk about those stark policy differences that he has with the former vice president and himself. As Alex mentioned, he really has to lay out the vision for the next 4 years if he were to be reelected and become president for the next 4 years. He has to lay that out. He has to lay out that stark contrast. That's perhaps what could give him an edge in winning over those undecided voters, because we really haven't seen President Trump consistently lay that out in the debate stage. We've only had 2. This is the last one and the last opportunity for him to do that tonight.
Alex, we talked about Joe Biden being up in the polls. That's great, but turnout is what really matters, right? Biden, he has the poll numbers, but voters, they have to show up, they have to mail in whatever they're going to do, they have to drop off this year. If Joe Biden plays a safe game tonight, like he seemed to try to do last time, is that going to juice turnout?
It depends who you ask, right? There's 2 wings of the party that he needs to support him, but then there's also those undecided or independent voters as well. So I think there's a lot to do with how he handles the attacks from President Trump, whether or not he bites back. Depends on whether we're talking about his policy issues or his family on this one. But they need turnout. They're happy to see that mail-in voting is going as well as it has been, but they need to make sure to talk about the issues that they care about. And so I think for that reason, you're going to hear them talk about the coronavirus at any turn. These 6 topics that have been carved out by NBC's Kristen Welker are more friendly, frankly, to Vice President Biden, and he'll be able to talk about the coronavirus in terms of race, in terms of climate change, in terms of the economy, in terms of health. And so he'll be able to pivot to what he wants to talk about and the message he wants to draw home. And frankly, the time between the first debate and the second debate, the president had coronavirus and had a super spreader ceremony. And so I think there's plenty of ammo for the former vice president to go after him a little bit more than we saw in the first debate.
I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point, Alex, that COVID is what he wants to discuss, and all roads lead to COVID, no matter if you're talking about the family, race, whatever it is. We know something, Willie, that the president apparently wants to talk about. It's these Hunter Biden allegations about the laptop. The president has said that Joe Biden himself was on the take. These are salacious allegations. They're not yet verified, though. The president seems to be promising he's going to bring them up a lot tonight.
Yeah, that's certainly right, Chance. The president has talked about this on the campaign trail, and the campaign, frankly, has talked about this with reporters that said that they are going to shine a light on this. They're going to really talk to the American people, try to get this story out there and try to, promote this whole theory that we're seeing. Of course, as you mentioned, hasn't been confirmed extensively yet, but this is something that the campaign says that they really want to talk about. They want to talk about the Washington insider status of the Biden family. They even had a few days ago, they had daily press calls on the status update of the Hunter Biden story. So the campaign is really pushing this narrative to perhaps try to portray Joe Biden as a corrupt politician of some 47 years. Of course, the Biden campaign pushing back a little, but it'll be interesting to see how Joe Biden responds if the president, in fact, does bring it up tonight, Chance.
Knowing that that's probably coming, Alex, how does the nominee respond to the president's accusations that Hunter Biden, his son, and Joe Biden himself were guilty of corruption?
Yeah, I mean, we heard Hunter Biden be brought up in the first debate, but the difference was it was about his drug use, and the campaign was really happy with how Biden responded to that, saying that he supported his son. Now, the difference tonight is it's going to be obviously a much different topic, and it'll be interesting to see if the question comes from the moderator, Kristen Welker, or from the president himself. We know that the president asked a couple questions to Biden, which he answered in the first debate. And so I spoke with a Trump official a couple of hours ago, and I asked him, or her rather, whether or not she thought families were off limits. And she actually is the one who brought up the Hunter Biden issue to me in the first place. And she said that she didn't feel that the family was off limits, though I can expect Biden to say that he trusts his son, that he himself didn't have anything to do with this, and that families should be off limits.
In some newer polling, Willie, Biden is the one pulling ahead on the question who would better handle the economy. And that's a tricky one, right? Because that has been the president's bread and butter throughout this.
It really has, Chance. In that morning consult poll, Biden has a slight edge over the president in terms of who would best handle the economic recovery, and also who would best handle the economic recovery as it relates to coronavirus and getting us through this. And that's certainly something that the president has time and time again talked about on the campaign trail, talked about getting the economy back. And his supporters, I talked to several of his supporters yesterday in North Carolina where he held a rally, and time again, they talked about the economic success as they see it that the president had, and that was one of the many reasons why they were supporting him. This is his bread and butter, and if he in fact loses that to polling to Joe Biden, it perhaps spells trouble for him on the one key issue that he always consistently, for the most part, Chance, has performed very strongly on when it comes to public polling.
Willie James Inman in Washington covering the Trump campaign. Alex Miller on the ground in Nashville tonight covering the Biden campaign and this big debate. We're going to see you both back many times tonight. This is the first of many. See you guys very soon. And a reminder for you at home, the debate gets underway officially tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to bring it to you uninterrupted, just like we have every time right here on Newsy. And you can see people already milling around. There are 2 new plexiglass erections in there, that they had to set those up to make sure that they were separated this time, just like at the VP debate. Coming up on Sunday, 60 Minutes has a live one on its hands. They're featuring sit-downs with the Democratic and Republican tickets. But after accusing CBS veteran Leslie Stahl of unfairness, President Trump decided to drop the interview early himself online. And then also, he didn't come back for the second half of the interview. It was going to be with Vice President Mike Pence. And today, as I said, he released the full interview on Facebook, all 30-plus minutes of it, days before it was set to air. You might have seen parts of it. If you didn't have 36 minutes, we want to tell you the biggies here. They touched on some really hot topics, including Obamacare, the individual mandate. This year, just as background here, the Supreme Court's going to hear a case brought by Republican state attorneys general and supported by the Trump administration, asking that because of the individual mandate being invalid, they say, they have to strike down the entire law. Listen.
See what happens. I think it'll end. I hope that they end it. It'll be so good if they end it, because we will come up with a plan, which will be a. Yeah, we will.
But you said it would already.
We have large sections of it already done.
Saul kept asking about pre-existing conditions. Millions of Americans have pre-existing conditions. The president said if the court does strike down Obamacare, people with pre-existing conditions, they're going to be okay. And so then this followed.
If there's no plan, a replacement plan,
Right.
and the Supreme Court says that Obamacare goes away, people with pre-existing conditions will be stranded.
No.
And that's just a fact.
It's wrong. It's
No.
wrong. A new plan will happen.
But will.
And we won't do anything, will and is. We won't do anything and no plan unless we have pre-existing conditions covered.
Shortly after the president posted that video, CBS News released this statement saying in part, quote, the White House's unprecedented decision to disregard their agreement with CBS News and release their footage will not deter 60 Minutes from providing its full, fair, and contextual reporting, which presidents have participated in for decades. The next 60 Minutes will also feature the Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. He's faced pressure on how he would handle the Supreme Court. Would he pack it if he were to win? Now he's talking about maybe forming a commission to study that. Alex Miller is going to describe it a bit later for you. But meanwhile, President Trump, his third nominee to the Supreme Court, took a big step closer to confirmation today. Politics reporter Kellen Howe joins us now from the National Mall in Washington. Kellen, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, halfway there now, it seems. What happens now?
Well, Chance, there's not long to go now for Amy Coney Barrett. She took a major step forward today in her confirmation process. Republicans calling their decision in the Senate Judiciary Committee a unanimous one, and this will tee up what will likely be a major political victory for President Trump heading into the election.
The nomination will be reported favorably to the floor with a unanimous vote.
The Senate Judiciary Committee voted to advance Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination to the full Senate, with a final confirmation vote expected Monday. The move will likely send President Trump into election night with his third Supreme Court nominee confirmed to the bench. President Trump tweeted about the news, calling it a big day for America. Democrats were a no-show.
We are boycotting this illegitimate hearing.
In their seats, photos of people they say have been helped by the Affordable Care Act, which Democrats fear Barrett will overturn. Just 1 week after the election, the Supreme Court will hear a case from the Trump administration arguing that Obamacare is unconstitutional. President Trump said he thinks the court will overturn the law in an interview with 60 Minutes.
We'll see what happens. I think it'll end. I hope that they end it. It'll be so good if they end it.
Barrett's confirmation would solidify a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Former Vice President Joe Biden says if he is elected president, he will form a bipartisan commission to make recommendations on how to reform the court system.
And I will ask them to, over 180 days, come back to me with recommendations as to how to reform the court system, because it's getting out of whack. The way in which it's being handled.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected as early as tomorrow to start filing procedural motions to move forward with that full Senate floor vote as early as Monday. But it won't necessarily be smooth sailing, Chance. It only takes a simple majority to confirm Barrett to the Supreme Court. But Democrats are expected to put up as many procedural roadblocks as they can to try to delay this vote. And we can expect to hear a lot of long floor speeches from Democrats in the Senate talking about why they think that Barrett's nomination and confirmation would pose a huge threat to the United States. Chance?
And I guess that gives Republicans about 7 days of wiggle room between then and Election Day, which has been their goal. Kellen Howell on the National Wall tonight. Kellen, thank you. More than 47 million Americans, which blows my mind, have already voted, according to one tracking site. Voter turnout is expected to shatter records. But this election, it's also catching the attention of other nations who the FBI says have already interfered or tried to. National security reporter Sasha Ingber has the latest on that. Sasha?
Chance, today Moscow and Tehran are denying accusations leveled against them last night by senior U.S. officials.
We have confirmed that some voter registration information has been obtained by Iran and separately by Russia.
They say it's groundless and absurd. As election experts explain, it's not shocking because voter registration data is publicly available. Democrats briefed before the last-minute press conference are taking issue with the focus on President Trump being undermined.
From the briefing, I had the strong impression it was much rather to undermine confidence in elections and not aimed at any particular figure.
Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe specifically said Iran sent falsely sourced emails without providing evidence. Newsy obtained an email which was made to look like it came from the pro-Trump Proud Boys group.
The message included an intimidating message suggesting that the person needed to change their party affiliation, vote a certain way, and the sender also claimed to have personal information about the individual.
As questions mount, there's also a bipartisan effort to keep Americans informed, but also calm.
Iran and Russia know that right now in our country, Republicans don't trust Democrats and Democrats don't trust Republicans. They know it, and they're using it against our country.
Senator Marco Rubio says the only way Iran and Russia will be successful is if Americans like you and me fall for it. Chance?
Sasha, thank you. Still ahead this hour, we're taking our questions straight to the experts and voters. What do you want to see tonight out of the next president? What do you want to hear this evening? I know you want to make sure you hear what they're saying rather than all that screaming. Newsy's original segment, People Not Pundits, that's right ahead. And Welcome back to Newsy Tonight. This Thursday, we are just 1 hour and 40 minutes away from the second and final presidential debate of this election cycle. This time, President Trump and Joe Biden, they're facing off in Music City. Here's a look at the venue right here. It's Belmont University. U.S. jobless claims, they fell significantly last week, but layoffs remain high across the country. This, as many Americans, they're still left waiting for a COVID relief bill, if it's coming. Newsy economy reporter Bianca Fascini has more on those talks from the Capitol. Bianca?
Hey, Chance, still no deal tonight and still no official deadline. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says a vote is possible before Election Day, but that means a deal would have to be reached this weekend.
We wouldn't take less of a bill to get it sooner.
Democrats in the White House have compromised on issues like a national testing plan, but differences remain on aid to state and local governments and liability protections. There's also another obstacle: Republican support. It remains unclear if a Mnuchin-Pelosi deal would garner enough yes votes from the Senate GOP. Mnuchin and Pelosi did speak again today, but it's not clear when they're going to talk next. Chance?
Bianca, thanks. So you have the economy, and then you have COVID, one of the other main topics in tonight's debate, especially now that the FDA just approved the first drug to be a therapeutic. On Thursday, the FDA announced the antiviral drug remdesivir has full approval to treat hospitalized COVID patients. President Trump, he took it last month during his hospitalization. A recent NIH study showed remdesivir, it cut the recovery time of patients to 10 days. That's compared to 15 days on average. So that's a lot. And the timing could not be more pivotal as cases continue to surge across the nation. For the second day in a row, the U.S. averaged nearly 60,000 new cases. Check out this. They haven't been that high since July. More than half of all states are reporting an increase in cases compared to just last week, with the Midwest taking the brunt of the surge. The weekly average of deaths and hospitalizations also rose for the third straight day. So let's bring in Kimberly Leonard tonight for some insight on the impact those numbers could have going into this debate and election. She's a senior healthcare reporter and business insider. Kimberly, COVID, it's going to be a major issue. We know that. Could you give us a sense of our current state right now? You see the line graph, you hear the numbers, but where are we as we listen to this debate tonight?
Well, we appear to be in a third wave of coronavirus cases. We haven't gotten a handle on the virus. We have done some things that appear to improve survivability of people who get the virus, but it's a long way away from where we need to be to, get the economy running again, to get children back to school, and to really get things back to normal. And so I would expect tonight for former Vice President Joe Biden to really hammer the president on his record on the coronavirus pandemic.
President Trump, he's been using the line, Kimberly, that he's done everything he could have done. You cover this day in and day out. Is that your understanding, that everything has been done that could be done, or should more be done still?
Well, there's definitely a lot more that can be done. And I think when you look at former Vice President Joe Biden's plan to combat the coronavirus, it actually looks very similar to a lot of the things that the Trump administration is doing. But the biggest difference is the sort of inconsistency between the president's message and then the message of his health advisors. So yes, we are moving toward a vaccine. However, the president tells people it'll be ready before Election Day, even though it won't be. He tells people to wear masks, but he himself doesn't wear one. He himself got the coronavirus. And so the biggest distinction when I talk to people close to the campaign and within the campaign is they feel as if that messaging, that consistent messaging and planning and articulation of those things is really what will differentiate Joe Biden from Donald Trump.
It's a good point. I've read several articles recently just from, middle of the road reporters saying Operation Warp Speed is maybe not getting the credit that it deserves, that it has been more efficient than they thought it was going to be. You also do cover the economy, and these are intertwined. Are we rounding the corner in terms of jobs and recovery now?
Well, I think a lot of the numbers that we're seeing reflect the fact that there's still some sort of optimism that some sort of deal will be reached on the stimulus, although analysts say it probably won't happen until after the election. It's not clear exactly how far until after the election. You know, if President Trump loses, will he want to sign a big relief package? Will it have to wait until February? Will Republicans go along? And what kind of a majority will they hold in the Senate if they hold a majority at all? And so those are a lot of sort of the looming questions that we have. You know, as you showed earlier, jobless claims were lower this past week. However, we haven't really rounded the corner, and there are still going to be long-term devastating effects from this pandemic.
One more thing, Kimberly. The public option, and I'd underscore the word option, being that it's not the only option run by the government. In recent polling, I've seen like 2/3 of Americans, they support this. I believe Joe Biden supports it. Is that a viable option economically? And would it be good for us health-wise to have that?
Well, we don't exactly have very firm details on how Joe Biden would do his public option. Would he leverage Medicare to do it? Would he allow states to set up Medicaid programs where people could buy government plans? So essentially, you know, or would he allow private plans to operate, you know, government plans essentially? So we don't really know exactly how he would run those plans and who would get taxed in order to fund them. They're popular because people like the idea of just having choices. So if you're someone who has the option of buying private health insurance or some kind of government plan that's similar to Medicare, people like the idea of being able to say, you know, one or the other, or at least having some sort of option for everyone out there. And really, if it's done properly, it could help to lower healthcare prices. But that, of course, means that the healthcare industry would take a hit. And so they'll be fighting this tooth and nail.
Sounds like it'd be a good question for Kristen Welker to try to nail him down on. Exactly how do you plan to pay for this and who would be included? Senior healthcare reporter Kimberly Leonard with Business Insider. Kimberly, thank you.
Thank you.
A short break and then what you need to know before you watch the final presidential debate of the year. Like that information from Kimberly, that was really insightful. We're going to give you more insights into the candidates' strategies and those controversies that are boiling right now they're going to have to face as they prepare to take this stage. Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. Our special coverage continues right after this. Welcome back to Newsy Tonight. Our special coverage continues as we get set for the final presidential debate of the 2020 race. You can see the auditorium is ready. All we need is the audience, the moderator, and the candidates. President Trump and Joe Biden are in Nashville this evening. They're going to face off one last time at Belmont University. Stay here for Newsy to watch that. We're going to have it uninterrupted for you. And our team is also standing by. Alex Miller is there in Nashville on the ground tracking the Biden campaign for us. Willie James Inman, who covers the Trump campaign, is here in Washington, D.C. Alex, Joe Biden, he took off basically the whole week to prep for this. What is his plan?
Yeah, he did take off a few days, more than candidates typically do, especially in the home stretch of a campaign. His plan is to talk about the coronavirus. If you look at the topics for tonight, there are 6 of them. You can see how he's going to be able to discuss this issue not only in the coronavirus section, but when talking about American families. You can anticipate he's going to talk about the impact on losing loved ones, talking about the economy. When you hear him talk about race, that's another subject. You can anticipate he's going to talk about the disproportionate number of people of color who have been impacted by this. And you can anticipate that during the climate change section, he might actually bring it back to race and talk about environmental justice. And we know that President Trump wanted this to be more of a foreign policy debate, and that's something that President Trump sees as one of his strengths. But you also have to remember, Chance, that former Vice President Joe Biden was once Senator Joe Biden, and so he was once the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman. So he also has foreign relations chops, and so he will likely be able to keep up with President Trump, at least when talking about that issue. And then the final topic, Chance, is about leadership, and this is what the campaign has made their whole pitch about, and so you can expect for him to make that his closing argument.
So we know well-laid plans like the ones you just talked about, those are one thing. On debate night, reality is another. Do you get the sense from the campaign that Biden's strategy for dealing with frequent interruptions, even if they're muted, is it different this time around?
Well, I don't think they were expecting the first time around to have as many interruptions as they did. But think about it this way. The interruptions were not great for Biden. They threw him off in some capacity. But if you think about the idea that he's going to be President Trump is going to be muted and Biden is going to have 2 whole minutes uninterrupted to speak, that is also something that could be worrisome to some people on the campaign. We know that he is a rambler and that he is gaffe prone. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles having these longer stretches of time, whether he digs himself into a hole that could actually impact him negatively.
And Willie, President Trump, he used his week to, slam Dr. Fauci, call experts idiots, feud with Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes. Does he have a plan?
Well, Chance, those are things that rally his base. I was talking to Trump supporters last night at a North Carolina rally that the president held, and comments like that against journalists and Dr. Fauci, they really rile his base up. So President Trump perhaps is being a little bit strategic. Of course, some might see that as a distraction if you talk to experts about this. But look, tonight, President Trump and the campaign really wanted this to focus on foreign policy, as Alex said, and I anticipate the president will try to bring foreign policy up. We know that he moved the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. That's something that he's touted time and time again on the campaign trail and promised in 2016 and delivered on when other presidents haven't. Also bringing U.S. troops home. Also the Abraham Accords, striking a peace deal or relations between Israel and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. Those are some of the topics I anticipate the president will bring up because he really sees this as a strong success. The White House sees it that way, and is perhaps a weak spot if you talk about COVID and all the other things on the list tonight. This is something that the president could highlight and perhaps be a positive light for voters who are undecided. Chance.
Yeah, we've even seen some Democrats say, for the most part, Democrats don't love his, snow globe approach of, just shake everything up. But in those moments like the Middle East, he actually does have some wins to show for it. Now, Willie, at a town hall at the White House, by the way, President Trump said he handled COVID as well as it could have been done. Is that the line now for the campaign? We did great.
Well, if you look at the messaging coming out of the campaign, they say that they've done everything they could in terms of getting a vaccine, Operation Warp Speed, helping those who are adversely affected by coronavirus. I'm talking about the seniors. This is something time and time again the campaign really touts up. They talk about it, but they also talk about a rosy picture, paint it as a rosy picture, the response that we've seen thus far. Of course, the president has been widely criticized for his response to coronavirus. Also, Americans overwhelmingly don't approve of what he did. So clearly this is something that they're hoping to get out there and talk about the economic recovery that is after coronavirus is over and done with, Chance.
Willie James Inman in Washington, Alex Miller on the ground in Nashville. Thank you both. We'll see you soon. Tonight, more than 46 million Americans, they have already cast their votes before the final debate. Take a look right here. We've been tracking this on Newsy Tonight every night for the past, I'd say, 2 weeks. It's officially a third of the total turnout in 2016 now, with a week and a half left until Election Day. That includes 1.3 million votes in key states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, more than 4 million votes in Florida. So how much will tonight really have an impact? Who has the most to gain or to lose? Senior politics editor Andrew Rafferty joins me now from Washington with a bird's eye view of this, kind of zoom out, big picture. Andrew, the number of gettable votes, it's shrinking by millions by the day. They've already voted. This truly is a last chance moment for these candidates.
It really is, Chance, and it's interesting to note that we actually today hit the mark of all the number of early and absentee voting in 2016. We still have 12 days to go. We knew we were going to hit that at some point, but it seems like we hit it now according to some metrics. But you're right. I was just looking at a poll that showed just about 4% of respondents said that there was a chance that they could change their mind between now and November 3rd. And so the reality is there isn't really too much persuasion that is left in either of these campaigns, and that's why we're seeing them really focus instead on turnout. And from Joe Biden, that means really...
You know, Andrew, and you've embedded with these campaigns in the past, so I'm curious for your take on this. Sometimes what's really big in D.C. or in a campaign, it doesn't necessarily translate, you know, in Kansas. Do voters really care about the Hunter Biden stuff that's coming out? Since it includes President Trump's, I should say, unverified claims that Joe Biden, that he was skimming money financially, that's a really serious allegation. Does it land?
You know, it's interesting. I think people care about this idea that people are using their families to profit. And that's obviously a theme that's been happening with both these candidates. And so we saw, it was actually about a year ago, Chance, that it was Hunter Biden did an interview with ABC News because this kept bubbling up throughout the Democratic primary. It kept bubbling up during impeachment earlier this year in February. And a majority of voters did say that they thought his role in the Ukrainian energy company was inappropriate. But I think the Trump campaign is really hoping to turn this story into something comparable to James Comey announcing the Hillary Clinton investigation being reopened a couple days ahead of the election. It doesn't have that level of impact yet because so much of it is unverified or in fact false or just kind of bizarre. And so the Trump campaign is really trying to make it into something bigger than it is at this point. Voters care about the idea of using your family to profit, but they don't necessarily see it in this case of Hunter Biden, Chance.
And real quick, Andrew, we saw last time just how quick a debate stage can turn into a mud pit, slinging it all around. Do we get more substance tonight?
Well, yes, only because the bar is so low. So I think it'll be a little bit more comparable to the VP debate. We know the Trump campaign saw what happened in Cleveland and don't want to repeat that. Biden as well. He was at fault for telling the president at one point to shut up. No one wants that again, neither of these campaigns. And so I think they're going to work hard to make it a little bit more substantive, but I still think there's going to be some nasty moments tonight, Chance.
Senior politics editor Andrew Rafferty, we're here with you. Either way, we're going to check in with you after the debate for your take. Thanks. And now tonight, we always want to hear from not only experts, but voters like you. In other words, people, not pundits. Once again, here on Newsy Tonight, we're listening to what voters really want to hear. What is most important to them in this final debate? James Packard has been leading those discussions. James, who are we hearing from tonight?
Hey, Chance, good to see you. We're talking to Callum Tuthill. He's a student in California, and Gretchen Linka Allen, a social worker and mom in Massachusetts. They had a lot to say. They are both voting for Joe Biden. I started by pitching this to Gretchen. Gretchen, you, I understand, are planning to vote for Joe Biden. Have you already voted, or are you planning to vote for him?
I am definitely voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I have my mail-in ballot, but I've decided to vote early in person and hand that mail-in ballot right to my elections office.
Tell me about that decision, because, you know, there's a lot of skepticism about sending a mail-in ballot through the mail. I mean, were you worried about delays?
I live in Massachusetts, so our ballots get counted the second that they're received, and I know that I could track it online. So I really wasn't worried about the Postal Service. I have faith in it. I've had faith in it for a long time, and I don't think that I've bought into the concerns.
So, Callum, tell me, is your vote more a vote for Joe Biden or against Donald Trump?
It's definitely against Donald Trump. And that's nothing against Joe Biden. He just wasn't the person that I was hoping would win, you know, especially being a younger person. But he's the best we got, and I will ride out with him.
So, Gretchen, you are, I understand, motivated a lot by character in this election.
I am.
Yeah, talk about that.
So I think what we have really been missing, and I'm not sure that we knew how much we would miss it until we saw such a lack of it. I think we are really missing the value of decency and compassion and empathy. I miss hearing politicians speaking and listening to one another. So when I look around and inequality and all that is going on around our country, I am just looking for someone to calmly get to work, to reach out a hand, to listen to Americans who are expressing themselves.
Callum, is there something that you want to hear tonight from the debate in particular?
Just for there to be less chaos, obviously, than the last debate, because the last debate was a train wreck. But I think both candidates also need to realize that so many people have already made up their mind and have already voted. And a lot of people that made up their mind aren't going to change it. So they need to actually talk about policy.
Regardless of who wins, are you going to feel comfortable about the result is the result and we should move on?
Yes, I have faith in our. I'm afraid I don't like saying that because I really, really, really hope that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win, but our system of democracy has been around for a very long time, and so there have been problems here and there. I've lived through 2 presidential elections where there have been issues, but I do believe in a peaceful transfer of power. I believe in our democracy, and I believe in our election system. So I am hopeful.
Whether that result is Joe Biden or Donald Trump, are you going to accept it?
Yes. Even with Donald Trump, there's really no choice unless, the Senate committee and the Supreme Court and everything that they said was going to happen. But I will have to accept it. And I feel that the rest of the U.S. will have to accept it as well.
Callum, a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Gretchen, thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Have a great day.
Now, we don't just talk to supporters of Joe Biden in this segment. I want you to hear something from one of the president's supporters. We spoke to her earlier in the week. Robbie Sanchez is her name. She lives in Florida, and she talked about the economic pain caused by this pandemic. She lays the blame at the feet of Congress for failing to pass another round of relief. And when I asked her about unity, listen to what she said. Whether it's President Trump or Joe Biden, Robbie, what would you need to see from them to unify the country?
Right now, one of the biggest things that we really need is economic. We need stimulus for people like myself that are furloughed. And there are, especially down here being in Florida, we are a huge tourism. We have the airlines, we have all the ships, as well as a lot of hotels and parks.
She's talking, Chance, about using policy as a means to unify people. And I see a theme there in something that Callum Tuthill said in California, the student in California, that so many people have made up their minds, and the people who have not made up their minds aren't going to be convinced by personal attacks. They may be convinced by policy. And so Callum was making the argument that these candidates should talk about policy tonight. We'll see if the muted mics do anything to help that out.
And maybe they'd be reached by another person reaching out and being a person rather than everyone just saying, I'm red, blue, Biden, Trump. I love these segments you do. James, thank you. Yeah. Just ahead, tonight's microphones get a mute button. We're digging into how that works, who has control, and how it's going to be different from the last debate next. Back with you now on Newsy Tonight. It is Thursday, but it's not any Thursday. It's the second and final presidential debate, and it's now just a smidge over an hour away. Belmont University in Nashville is playing host to this, and tonight there's going to be one big change in this format. Last month's showcase between President Trump and Joe Biden featured a whole lot of this.
What did he do to deserve it? What did he do with Burisma to deserve $183,000?
None of that is true. Let him answer.
None of that is true.
Oh, really? He didn't get
No,
$3.5 million?
Mr. President,
totally,
Mr. President, please.
Totally discredited.
Disagreement. Not a whole lot of, intelligible conversation, but this week the Nonpartisan Debate Commission adopted a new rule. Alex Livingston, the new host of Newsy's Morning Rush, 7 a.m. Eastern, by the way, joins us from Chicago tonight. Alex, could you just talk to us about this muted microphone? There's been so much hubbub. How does the rule work? How's it going to go over?
Oh my goodness, I know. So Chance, a little bit of backstory. I was actually driving a U-Haul here to Chicago for this job the night of the first debate. But as I was listening, it was a lot of that sound that was just played. You don't really know who's talking, whose turn it is, what they're saying. But when I stopped for the night, I went on Twitter and all I saw were tweets begging for there to be a mute button in the next debate. So here we are. And I want to walk you through some polls taken after that first presidential debate that prompted those rule changes. According to Morning Consult, more than half of those who tuned in did not enjoy watching the debate, and 6% said they had no opinion. And this is where the rule change comes into the picture. In this poll from Morning Consult, 64% thought penalizing a candidate for interrupting was a good idea, and 72% thought moderators should be allowed to turn off mics. So here's what we can expect tonight, Chance. Both President Trump and Joe Biden will each have 2 minutes of uninterrupted time to speak, and the only candidate whose mic will be open is the candidate who has the floor according to the rules. Now, after that, both mics will be open for discussion. And the hope here is to make sure both candidates get equal time. Now, while both campaigns agree to this new rule after a chaotic first debate, the Trump campaign has put out a statement saying they are, quote, committed to debating regardless of last-minute rule changes from the biased commission in their latest attempt to provide advantage to their favored candidate. We can expect to hear topics, a wide range of topics, from race, national security, COVID-19, and climate change. Chance?
So I guess we're just going to have to see how this rule works. I mean, if I guess someone's really determined they can use their outdoor voice and just speak and somehow get picked up. But Alex, I know you're going to be here with us through this, plus election night. We're excited to see you, by the way. Morning rush, Monday morning, I think is the first morning, 7 a.m. Eastern. You're used to mornings.
Yes.
You're used to waking up, at 2 a.m. Welcome to the Newsy family. Just introduce yourself real quick.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chance. I mentioned I drove here all the way from Florida in a U-Haul, and my sister and my dog were in the other car. But this is something that I've been so excited about. I have worked mornings in the past, but that 2 a.m. alarm does hit a little bit differently every day, Monday through Friday. But I couldn't be happier to join the group that we have here.
A very cute dog, by the way. I'm sure it's on your Instagram. Very cute dog.
Yes.
All right, Alex Livingston, new partner, new family member here at Newsy. We're so happy to have you with us tonight and all the days to come. All right, we're just over an hour away from the final presidential debate. Live, uninterrupted coverage gets underway 9 p.m. Eastern. It's happening here in Nashville, Belmont University. More of our special coverage tonight on Newsy Tonight, right after this. We're now just over an hour away from the second final presidential debate. We're going to bring it to you live 9 p.m. Eastern, without interruption, and as always, without spin. Voter turnout is on pace to shatter previous records. More than 46 million Americans have already cast their ballot. 46 million. Every one of those votes is important, and some unexpected voting communities could play a significant role in this outcome. Usher Qureshi has more on that.
Young, professional, and politically savvy, South Asian Americans like Sabina Bukhari are beginning to flex their electoral power.
This is a momentous election, as was the last one, and so have definitely upped my political engagement in all the ways that I can.
The Republican Hindu Coalition and South Asians for Biden are just two groups driven by very different political ideologies that are presenting potentially potent voting blocs, especially in key races.
It's a disproportionately affluent electorate. It's a community that's growing. It could make a huge difference in, say, Senate and House races.
South Asian Americans have traditionally high voter turnout and have become the second largest immigrant group in the U.S. They also tend to lean Democratic. A post-2016 election survey indicates that 90% of Bangladeshi Americans, 88% of Pakistani Americans, and 77% of Indian Americans voted for Hillary Clinton.
The President of the United States of America.
President Trump has made a major play for the Indian vote with campaign ads. And last year, a large rally in Texas alongside Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi attracted a crowd of 50,000 Indian Americans.
Common sense gun control matters.
This week, South Asians for Biden launched a digital ad campaign series featuring celebrities encouraging South Asians to vote blue.
I know a lot of the aunties and uncles tend to be much more conservative and kind of lean Republican for sure. You know, I think it's up to younger people, younger than myself, to try and change some minds.
Author and filmmaker Gautam Chopra, along with his father Deepak, sister, and his niece, a first-time voter, put out their own video stumping for Biden and Harris.
We all just, three generations and sort of all feel very strongly about the stakes of this election and decided to participate in it.
Making inroads at the highest levels of office as Bukhari means the power of the South Asian vote is being recognized, paving the way for future generations.
Young South Asians and young South Asian women who do want to occupy a role in our government one day, it's important to have that representation so we know that we can and to be able to represent our communities to the best of our ability.
In Chicago, I'm Usher Qureshi reporting.
Our thanks to Usher. And if this is your first time joining us tonight, welcome. And tell your friends. And for those who are back with us again tonight, thank you. It's good to see you again. Tonight, through Election Day and well beyond that, we are committed to bringing you the stories you really need to know about. Sans opinion, sans pundits, just straightforward news. It's more important than ever right now. Newsy special coverage continues now.
If you want your children to grow up in a free nation where they can speak their minds and practice their religion and live by their values, then you must defeat Sleepy Joe Biden and the radical left.
So much is at stake for this nation. The very soul of the nation is at stake.
About reporting and analysis, plus a big rule change following that anything goes event last month.
Well, I think the mute is very unfair, but that's my life. In the meantime, that's the White House standing behind me, right?
How will the so-called mute button work? How will it be received? And as we always do it here on Newsy, we're shunning the spin masters, instead inviting on real people to share their real perspectives on the issues that matter most to them. People, not pundits. James Packard brings us the latest installment. Newsy's special coverage of 2020's final debate night starts now. Bill tonight is playing host to this last debate before Election Day, and finally we're seeing people in the crowd milling around. This is the last debate, as I said, before November 3rd, 12 days away at this point. And at the moment, President Trump trails in most national and battleground polls. So, how will he and Joe Biden spend their final time in front of millions and millions of voters tonight? We're going to bring it to you live, uninterrupted, as we always do, and no spin. Let's get to the ground in Music City right now. Alex Miller is there. Alex, just set the stage for us if you would.
Yeah, well, it's starting to die down outside because, like you said, everybody's going inside. But you could tell today that there was a buzz here because we are really not just having a final debate, but we are really right up against the end of Election Day here. And so you can tell that the surrogates were very excited to talk about their candidates and make sure that their platforms and their positions are heard. The closing argument today. We're in the fourth quarter here, and so there's a lot on the line for both of these campaigns as they try to get people out to vote, because that's really the priority tonight, is making sure that they hone their message in order to get people to the polls.
Alex, let's get to the Biden campaign, which you cover in just a moment, but I want to bring in also tonight Willie James Inman, who covers the Trump campaign here at Newsy. Willie, we're just about an hour out at this point. We know the president, he likes to go on the offensive, doesn't want to play defense. Anything he wants to avoid tonight?
Well, that's certainly the case, Chance. And one of the things that we're hearing reportedly that the president will avoid is interrupting former Vice President Joe Biden so much as he did in that first contentious debate last time around. But one thing, I have to note in terms of going on the offensive, the Trump campaign brought out a special guest of sorts, according to the White House poll reports. Tony Bobulinski, who's an associate of Hunter Biden, alleges that Joe Biden, it's false that Joe Biden never discussed any of the dealings that he had with his son Hunter Biden. His son Hunter Biden had, I should say, and he presented some 3 phones and said that he has evidence that he's turning over to authorities in the matter. And so that's certainly something that the Trump campaign is basically putting out there before reporters and going on the offensive about tonight. And they've consistently said they're going to bring up this Hunter Biden situation, and they're doing it just moments before the second and final presidential debate, Chance.
Alex, I guess we can learn a lot from that one guest who's there, right, of what the tactic might be from the president. I was going to ask you the same question as Willie. What does the vice president want to avoid? For 2 years, he's wanted to avoid this question of Hunter Biden. Can he?
It's going to be pretty hard with him sitting in the front row, most likely. We know that this is something that the president has done before in 2016 when he brought out former President Bill Clinton's accusers. So this is something that is sort of expected, but this particular person could be called out by the president himself in the middle of the debate. As Willie said, he just spoke to members of the press saying that he's going to speak to a Senate committee tomorrow, essentially saying that former Vice President Biden was lying. So this is obviously an issue that he has wanted to avoid for quite some time and is going to get hit on either by the moderator or by President Trump himself. The other issues that he's probably going to want to avoid to some degree is when he's talking about climate change, talking about his position on the Green New Deal, because not only is he trying to court independent voters and some never Trump Republicans, but he's also trying to court the left and make sure that they come out to vote for him as well. And so he's walking this fine line as he talks about climate change. And then the other issue, of course, that he was pressed on in the first debate is court packing. And he did release a statement talking about creating a bipartisan commission, but it's possible that he's going to be pressed even further to see what he would do with a bipartisan commission finding, whether or not he would end up deciding to pack the court.
Willie, I think a lot of us are hesitant and really trying to be thoughtful this year about falling into any last-minute shiny object traps to, change the narrative and what have you. This kind of reminds me of 4 years ago, I was in St. Louis covering when the president brought in the accusers of Bill Clinton. Tonight, we see that Hunter Biden's apparent associate is going to be there in the crowd. But these allegations, they're not verified yet, but they're salacious, and they get to now, he says, the vice president himself and being on the take many years ago. That's a really serious allegation. Do you think that, based on your interactions with the campaign, he's going to bring that up a lot?
I anticipate he will, Chance. I mean, the campaign has even held daily press calls over the past week or so, basically talking about the Hunter Biden situation, basically talking about the reports and accusing the press of not wanting to cover it, accusing big tech firms of censoring the story. This is something that the campaign has said time and time again, and the president himself on the campaign trail. They have said that they want to consistently bring this up in the final hour of the 2020 election, because this is a really big story in the eyes of the Trump campaign, and they say the media isn't covering it fairly. Of course, as you mentioned, a lot of this hasn't been verified quite yet, but just bringing this guest here tonight is just a stunning development and just reminiscent of 2016 as well.
I guess with that in mind, Alex, does Joe Biden talk about the secret China bank account that the New York Times said that they got from his tax documents but weren't declared publicly in the past? We heard President Trump just yesterday, he was stumping for Biden, and he said, do you think I could have gotten away with that if I was running for re-election? You think Fox News might have cared about that? They'd call me Beijing Barry. Do you think tonight Joe Biden goes for that line?
He could, but it is a fine line because there's some stories that have to do with Hunter Biden and Chinese bank accounts. So there's a fine line, once again, that he's going to have to walk. But he is going to be able to talk about the president's relationships with adversaries. President Trump himself said earlier this week that China was the United States' biggest adversary. And so to say that he is being loyal to them, in addition to the fact that he can kind of pivot this back to talking about Trump's taxes. The New York Times is reporting that this is not listed on his financial disclosure. So I think if Biden decides to talk about this, it's going to be under the guise of we don't know who this president has ties to.
I see. Willie, real quick, you know, when you ask voters what do you really, really care about, as we've done recently in our polling, Hunter Biden isn't number one. You know, it's always either the economy, jobs, or COVID. And at a town hall at the White House just this week, President Trump said he handled COVID as well as it could have been done. Is that the line we should anticipate now, is that we did great?
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case, Chance, because the president has tried to be a cheerleader for his own administration, basically try to paint a rosy picture of what he's done to tackle the coronavirus. Of course, he's been widely criticized, not only by people and governors in his own party, of course, people on the opposite side as well, medical experts adding to that. But clearly he wants to get over the coronavirus. He wants to make sure we get through it, of course, getting the vaccine, but he tends to talk about it through a rosy lens, saying that we're going to come up with a vaccine really quickly, we're going to get through the economic recovery, because if you get to the economic recovery, he typically tends to get high marks on that for the most part. He thinks he has a better chance, perhaps perceives a better chance of winning re-election chance. You know, so that's just something that the president typically tends to do when he talks about the coronavirus. It typically tends to be a tough topic for him to tackle on. And it certainly could be, and the former vice president could attack him on that tonight.
Billy James Inman in Washington, Alex Miller in Nashville. We're going to see you guys in just a bit. And I should say, we were watching full video here while you were talking there, and you do see a lot of masks on the floor this time, and it's not optional. We did see the last time the commission say, if anybody, including the first family, walks on here without a mask, you're out of here. We did see a few people remove theirs, I guess, to take a picture. Maybe that's allowed? I don't know, but they're doing it. Okay, a reminder, the debate gets underway tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to bring it to you uninterrupted, the full thing right here on Newsy. Coming up on Sunday, I think we're all going to be watching. 60 Minutes has a live one on its hands. They're featuring sit-downs with both the Democratic and Republican tickets. But after accusing CBS veteran Leslie Stahl of unfairness, President Trump, he decided to drop the interview early, walk out, also not come back for the second part that was planned with Vice President Mike Pence. And today he released the full interview on his Facebook page, all 30+ minutes of it days before it was set to air. And if you watch it, we did, they can touch on a lot of big topics in just 30 minutes. That includes Obamacare, the individual mandate in there. This year, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case brought by Republican state attorneys general and supported by the Trump administration, asking that because of the individual mandate being invalid, they say, you have to throw out the whole law. Listen.
See what happens. I think it'll end. I hope that they end it. It'll be so good if they end it, because we will come up with a plan, which will be yeah, we will.
But you said it would already.
We have large sections of it already done.
That's something you might hear tonight. He said it will be so good if they do strike down the whole thing. So Stahl, of course, she followed up asking about pre-existing conditions, millions of Americans. The president said if the court does strike down Obamacare, people with pre-existing conditions, they're going to be fine. Here's what followed.
If there's no plan, a replacement plan,
right,
and the Supreme Court says that Obamacare goes away, people with pre-existing conditions will be stranded. No. And that's just a fact.
It's wrong. It's wrong. A new plan will happen.
But will.
And we won't do anything, will and is. We won't do anything and no plan unless we have pre-existing conditions covered.
Shortly after the president posted the video, CBS News released this statement saying in part, quote, The White House's unprecedented decision to disregard their agreement with CBS News and release their footage will not deter 60 Minutes from providing its full, fair, and contextual reporting, which presidents have participated in for decades. The next 60 Minutes is also going to feature the Democratic nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden. He's faced pressure over how would he handle the Supreme Court, for instance, if he were to win. Would he pack it? He's now talking about having a commission of some sort to advise him. Meanwhile, President Trump's third nominee to the Supreme Court took a big step closer to confirmation. Politics reporter Kellen Howell joins us now from the National Mall in Washington. Kellen, I'm sure, Republicans, they can just smell it at this point. Judge Amy Coney Barrett, she's halfway there. What happens now?
Well, Chance, there's not much further to go for Amy Coney Barrett at this point. Today's vote, which Republicans are calling a unanimous decision, really pushes her through to the final step in her confirmation process. And it tees up what is likely to be a major political victory for President Trump heading into the election.
The nomination will be reported favorably to the floor with a unanimous vote.
The Senate Judiciary Committee voted to advance Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court nomination to the full Senate, with a final confirmation vote expected Monday. The move will likely send President Trump into election night with his third Supreme Court nominee confirmed to the bench. President Trump tweeted about the news, calling it a big day for America. Democrats were a no-show.
We are boycotting this illegitimate hearing.
In their seats, photos of people they say have been helped by the Affordable Care Act, which Democrats fear Barrett will overturn. Just 1 week after the election, the Supreme Court will hear a case from the Trump administration arguing that Obamacare is unconstitutional. President Trump said he thinks the court will overturn the law in an interview with 60 Minutes.
We'll see what happens. I think it'll end. I hope that they end it. It'll be so good if they end it.
Barrett's confirmation would solidify a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court. Former Vice President Joe Biden says if he is elected president, he will form a bipartisan commission to make recommendations on how to reform the court system.
And I will ask them to, over 180 days, come back to me with recommendations as to how to reform the court system, because it's getting out of whack. The way in which it's being handled.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is expected tomorrow to begin the procedure of pulling this motion to the floor to have a full vote on Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation as early as Monday. It only takes a simple majority to confirm her, Chance, but don't expect it to be entirely smooth sailing. Democrats have made it pretty clear that they plan to throw up as many procedural challenges as possible to try to delay this vote for as long as possible. And they may try to make some kind of extended floor speeches on the Senate floor talking about why they think that Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation would pose an existential threat to the country, Chance.
Kellen Howell on the National Mall tonight. Kellen, thank you. More than 47 million Americans, you might be one of them, I am too, have already voted according to one tracking site. Voter turnout's expected to shatter records, but this election, it's also catching the attention of other nations who the FBI says have already tried to or did interfere. National security reporter Sasha Ingber has the latest on that. Sasha?
Chance, today Moscow and Tehran are denying accusations leveled against them last night by senior U.S. officials.
We have confirmed that some voter registration information has been obtained by Iran and separately by Russia.
They say it's groundless and absurd. As election experts explain, it's not shocking because voter registration data is publicly available. Democrats briefed before the last-minute press conference are taking issue with the focus on President Trump being undermined.
From the briefing, I had the strong impression it was much rather to undermine confidence in elections and not aimed at any particular figure.
Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe specifically said Iran sent falsely sourced emails without providing evidence. Newsy obtained an email which was made to look like it came from the pro-Trump Proud Boys group.
The message included an intimidating message suggesting that the person needed to change their party affiliation, vote a certain way, and the sender also claimed to have personal information about the individual.
As questions mount, there's also a bipartisan effort to keep Americans informed, but also calm.
Iran and Russia know that right now in our country, Republicans don't trust Democrats and Democrats don't trust Republicans. They know it, and they're using it against our country.
Senator Marco Rubio says the only way Iran and Russia will be successful is if Americans like you and me fall for it. Chance?
Sasha, thank you. Still ahead this hour, we're staying away from all the spinmeisters out there. There are plenty. They have a lot to say, but we're taking our questions straight to experts and voters, people with actual something to say. What do you want to hear from the next president tonight, whether it is Biden or Trump? Newsy's original segment, People Not Pundits, is right ahead. And a live look inside the Curb Event Center at Belmont University. Less than 45 minutes now from this starting. Newsy's special coverage of the final presidential debate of 2020 continues after this. Welcome back to Newsy Tonight. We are now just 39 minutes away from the second and final presidential debate of this entire election cycle. This time, President Trump and Joe Biden face off in the Music City. Here's a look at the venue. It's Belmont University, and we're going to get to more of what you can expect from tonight's debate in just a bit. But first, we want to head out to Arizona, a major battleground state this year. It has gone red every time except once in presidential elections since 1952. In 2016, it was pretty close for the president, but he won. And it's unclear if this time around, Arizona is going to help push him toward 270. So for more insight, Let's go to the ground. Newsy's Nathaniel Reed is in Phoenix tonight. Nate, yesterday you showed us that the demographic shifts happening right now, they appear to favor Democrats. But there's another part of this. Are political opinions shifting among the state's Republicans?
Well, in addition to those demographic shifts, which overall favor Democrats, there are some longtime Republicans in the state who say this year they're voting blue. This is the first time anyone's recorded Gord Akra and Larry Coon.
I've always played music.
Strumming on the green of Courthouse Square in Prescott, Arizona, a Republican stronghold that went for the president by over 30 points in 2016. The cities of Arizona feel like oases under the desert sun, but nearly 2,000 miles from Washington, Arizonians have strong opinions. So more generally, what do you think of what's going on in Washington?
You know, you really don't want to ask me that question. First of all, you can't answer it in a 30-second soundbite.
In these parts, support for Trump, who visited this week, remains high.
He's a narcissist. He's flamboyant. He says stupid things. But from a governing perspective, he's wonderful.
But the president's rhetoric has polarized establishment conservatives in reliably red Arizona.
I am a Republican. I will always be a Republican. This isn't about changing my party or anything like that. I just want better leadership.
Cindy McCain, the widow of U.S. Senator John McCain, broke ranks with her party and endorsed her husband's longtime friend and colleague Joe Biden last month.
They did not agree on very much, but they worked across the aisle. They fought like cats and dogs. But in the end, it was not for personal gain. It was for America. And they'd go to dinner together afterwards.
The president's polarizing nature caused lifelong Republicans Paul and Joan Petty to switch their registration. So you voted for McCain? Voted for?
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the turning point for you?
Trump.
The couple are retired CIA officers who moved to Arizona after hearing a profile of Prescott on National Public Radio 2 decades ago while stuck in D.C. traffic.
We've already voted. Blue all the way down. People have always looked to us for leadership around the world, and now they're all going, so what's really going on there?
I've been a conservative Republican my entire life. That's not changing. But I think that the best thing for the conservative cause and for the Republican cause, frankly, is to elect a Democrat in November.
Jeff Flake was frequently critical of President Trump during his term as Arizona's junior U.S. Senator before retiring in 2018. He said he's reached out to former colleagues and encouraged them to vote blue, even if it's just this once.
A lot of people that I know don't expect to support another Democrat in the future. They want to go back to supporting Republicans. But man, we have to have a Republican that we can support, and one that that seeks to actually build the party, not just drill down on a diminishing base.
If a blue wave crests in Arizona, it won't be due to demographic changes alone.
We were the inclusive party. We were the party of thinkers and idealists and people that would lead. We were the party, and unfortunately, I think we've lost our way.
Now, Cindy McCain also serves on Joe Biden's Transition Advisory Board. She says that he'll have a diverse cabinet if elected and diverse politically as well. Folks from all over the political spectrum. Now, Jeff Flake, who we spoke with in the video, he's one of the people being considered potentially for a role in Joe Biden's cabinet. He told us yesterday no one from the Biden camp, though, has reached out to him. Chance?
Nathaniel Reed in Phoenix tonight. Nate, thank you. Short break, and then what you need to know before you watch the final presidential debate of this entire year. We're going to give you some insight into the candidates' strategies and their controversies they're facing. Some of them are heating up in the last 30 minutes, we're finding out. They're preparing to take the stage at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. Stay with us. Our special coverage, it picks up right after this. Just about to the half hour. Welcome back to a special edition of Newsy Tonight as we get set for the final presidential debate of the entire 2020 race. You're taking a live look right now in Nashville, and what good timing. It looks like we have one of the caravans coming in there. Could be either one of the men who are going to be on the stage tonight, Joe Biden or President Trump. We're going to keep an eye there, inside and outside. President Trump, Joe Biden in Nashville. They're facing off one last time at Belmont University. And as you watch here on Newsy, we promise you no interruptions and no spin. Our team is standing by. Alex Miller in Nashville tonight, tracking the Biden campaign for us. Willie James Inman covering the Trump campaign in Washington tonight. Alex, Joe Biden, he took off basically the last week to prep for this. That is a lot to turn over at the very end of this thing. What is the plan?
Well, look, I mean, you don't see someone take off in terms of healthcare, whether it's in terms of American families and the economy and losing loved ones and showing that he can be a leader. And I think you're going to hear him talk about race issues, whether it has to do with the coronavirus or whether it has to do with climate change. And so he's going to try to pit himself as a person with a plan, regardless of the issue, to pull the country out of the coronavirus come 2021.
Alex, he's had a full week to think about this, and really a full month since the last time. Joe Biden has not wanted to talk about court packing. Essentially, he said last time, I guess you'll find out after I'm president, which satisfied exactly like 0 Americans. Now he has a new answer on that tonight?
Yeah, he does, and I don't know how many people are going to be satisfied with this one either. It's going to air on 60 Minutes, but they released a clip of it basically saying his plan is to create a bipartisan commission that would take about 6 months to look at the idea of court packing and reforming the courts, as they call it. Not everybody is thrilled with the response. There are a lot of Democrats who are looking for some red meat on this one. Listen to what Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democrat National Committee, told me earlier today.
Yeah, Joe Biden understands that there's a real problem. He also wants to make sure that we can solve the problem in a way that will be sustainable long-term and fair long-term. And so that's what he wants. That's what he's going to do. And I think that that approach is going to enable us to put forth solutions that really do have that staying power that's so critically important.
Look, Chance, it's a tough position for Biden to be in right now. He is a traditionalist, but at the same time, there are those in his party that are extremely frustrated with the way that the Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Amy Coney Barrett went, all the way back to Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, and they're looking for their candidate to give them a little bit more than we're just going to study this issue. And so he could get pressed on this again. He's got at least a little bit of a more clear answer this time around, but beyond the commission, he hasn't really said anything.
Willie, you covered the Trump campaign. What's the president's main goal tonight?
Well, Chance, we know that the president really wanted to talk about foreign policy, so perhaps during that national security part of this debate tonight, he'll come out and talk about some of the things that he thinks are successes, moving the embassy in Jerusalem, also bringing soldiers home, and some of the peace deals that he says that are extreme successes that he brokered between the Israelis and some of the Arab nations. Also, Hunter Biden, this has been something that the Trump campaign has talked about time and time again. Communications director of the Trump 2020 campaign, Tim Murtaugh, has been tweeting about this all night. And this is something that they have said time and time again, they're going to make an important pivotal campaign issue leading into Election Day. So I anticipate those are some of the 2 things that President Trump comes off of and talks about his successes, and comes on offense to put Joe Biden on defense, Chance.
Willie, President Trump, he spent the last 2 weeks just sort of pinballing from one conflict to another very publicly. Do we know how that careening approach is received by the public in debates?
Well, that approach for his supporters, it's red meat for them. They really love when the president goes out and talks about folks like this. They say that time and time again, they tell me, some of his supporters tell me that he's not a traditional politician, although he, of course, he is president of the United States right now. But what the president really needs is not those people who are behind him. He needs those undecided voters, those people perhaps that are in the middle, that are thinking about Joe Biden or thinking about voting for President Trump. And so there's perhaps a missed opportunity that he didn't go through with with the full interview in 60 Minutes. It's also perhaps a missed opportunity with the Dr. Fauci comments talking about healthcare experts, because time and time again we've seen in polls that people trust people like Anthony Fauci more than they do with the president on when it comes to coronavirus chance.
Lily James Inman in Washington tonight. Alex Miller on the ground in Nashville. Thank you both. We'll talk to you soon. Tonight, more than 46 million Americans have cast their vote before the final debate. Did you think 10 years ago we'd ever say that? 46 million, like 10, 12 days out? Take a look for yourself. We've been tracking this closely on Newsy tonight. That's officially a third of the total turnout in 2016. With a week and a half left until the election, that many votes are already cast. It includes 1.3 million votes in key states like Pennsylvania, like Wisconsin, and more than 4 million votes in Florida. So with that in mind, how much of an impact will it really have tonight at this debate? Who gains the most? Who could lose the most? Senior politics editor Andrew Rafferty joins me now from Washington for a big picture view here. Andrew, let's talk turnout, because Joe Biden, he is up in most of the polls, nationally, swing states, all of it. But voters have to show up or mail in their ballots, right? If Joe Biden plays a kind of safe game tonight, can he still juice the turnout?
Right. So, Chance, I think his message tonight is really to those people who maybe didn't get their absentee ballot in the mail and have to go through an extra step in order to make sure that they get it sent to them, or the people who show up and vote and see that their line is wrapped around the block 4 times and that it's going to take them 2 hours. And that's kind of really the closing argument I think a lot of these Democrats are making on behalf of Joe Biden, who has, as you noted, been pretty quiet this week. But it hasn't been quiet is Barack Obama and his running mate Kamala Harris. And they're really the ones who they think are the best messengers, especially young people who maybe haven't voted before or haven't really familiar with mail-in voting, some of the procedures that go along with it. That's really what it comes down to. And we think of like turnout as a traditional sense of people physically going to polling, but we know that it's going to be so different. It already is so different. And it is interesting to note that actually today we hit the same number, eclipsed actually, the number of early votes that were cast in 2016, and we're still 12 days out. And so for the Biden campaign, it's all about what's at stake if Joe Biden somehow does not win and they have a redux of what happened with the polls in 2016, Chance.
That's why the early votes still blow my mind. And on the screen here, we're seeing live the motorcades rolling in. And something we found out maybe 20 minutes ago, Andrew, this is a sensitive topic, but it's going to be a topic, so we need to talk about it. A guest of the president is going to be apparently a man who used to be a business associate of Hunter Biden. The president seems to be hoping that this percolating issue is really going to boil over tonight with this and some of his discussion. Do voters care about this Hunter Biden controversy? Because it does include the president saying, and this is unverified, that Joe Biden was skimming money financially from some of this. That's a serious allegation.
It's very serious. Right now it's unverified, and in fact, parts of it has been completely debunked. But I mean, when you're looking at the list of issues that are playing into the 2020 race, it's healthcare, it's the coronavirus, it's the economy. It certainly is not this, but that's not to dismiss this entirely. I think people, anytime they see any sort of nepotism or people profiting off of their position in public life, it does give voters pause. And so this is very much out of the Trump playbook in 2016. You remember he brought some guests that were meant to undercut Hillary Clinton to some of those debates when he was running in 2016. And so, you know, this goes really back to the strategy that we've seen playing out for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that is President Trump and his campaign are continuing to try to turn out his base instead of really trying to make any sort of overtures, which could be for independent or moderate voters who are still making up their minds, which, you know, to their credit, there aren't that many of them right now. So maybe the base is really the most important thing for them.
Senior politics editor Andrew Rafferty, we're going to check back in with you after the debate for your take. Andrew, thank you. Now tonight also, this is central to our coverage. Every single debate night, election night, we want to hear from voters, people like you, everyday people. In other words, the people out there, not the pundits out there, they're everywhere else. Once again, here on Newsy Tonight, we're listening to what voters want to hear tonight. What is at the top of their list of needs and wants in this final debate? James Packard has been leading all these discussions. James, who are we hearing from tonight?
Hey, James, we're going to pick up our discussion again with Kellen Tuthill, a student in California, and Gretchen Lake-Howard, a social worker and mom in Massachusetts. Tell me what motivated that vote. What was the thing that made you go, that's my guy?
Just really not wanting another 4 years of Donald Trump and the current administration that we have. I consider myself an independent more so than a Democrat or anything else, but seeing kind of the damage that has been done and the things that haven't been done, haven't been kept up to be promises by President Trump is not with someone who wasn't a politician, but it turned out to be a very bad idea.
Do you feel, Gretchen, that Joe Biden has the ability to unify a very divided country to, in the first year of his presidency, get us to a place where this time next year we could be having more productive conversations about policy, about how to elevate Americans who are left behind, etc.?
I certainly hope so. I think that we as Americans are capable of that. I think that we are not as divided as we want to believe that we are, or I think our impressions are that one side thinks this and the other thinks that. And I think on many issues, we're not that far away.
What's the one thing, Callum, that you think is going to unify us in the coming year? Because whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden who takes that oath of office on January 20th, they have a really big task ahead of them to try to unify a very divided country and get us out of multiple crises. What do you think the most effective thing to get there is going to be?
We need to get back on the train of bipartisanship. We need to start working together and stop saying, oh, well, this person's a Democrat, this person's a Republican and independent. We need to get everyone together on the same page and figure out what we're actually going to do. Because we've lost a lot of bipartisanship, and that causes a lot of problems because people don't talk to each other. They yell at each other. And we can't continue to operate like that because it's just not going to work.
I've been trying to get as many voters as I can on this. Regardless of who wins, the result comes the following morning, next week, next month, whatever. Regardless of who wins, are you going to feel comfortable about the result is the result and we should move on?
Yes, I have faith in our... I'm afraid, I don't like saying that because I really, really, really hope that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win. But our system of democracy has been around for a very long time. And so there have been problems here and there. I've lived through 2 presidential elections where there have been issues. But I do believe in a peaceful transfer of power. I believe in our democracy, and I believe in our election system. So I am hopeful.
Gretchen, thank you.
Thank you so much, James.
Callum, a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, thank you for having me.
Now that you can hear me, I should let you know that Callum is a student in California. Gretchen, who you heard from second, a mom and social worker in Massachusetts. And we don't just talk to Joe Biden supporters in this segment. I want you to hear something from the president's supporters as well. We spoke to someone earlier in the week who had an interesting insight on what's going to drive unity in this country. Her name is Robbie Sanchez. She's a voter in Florida. She talked about the economic pain caused by this pandemic, laying the blame for that at the feet of Congress, failing to pass another round of relief. But listen to what she said when I asked her about unity. Whether it's President Trump or Joe Biden, Robbie, what would you need to see from them to unify the country?
Right now, one of the biggest things that we really need is economic. We need stimulus for people like myself that are furloughed. And there are, especially down here being in Florida, we are a huge tourism. We have the airlines, we have all the ships, as well as a lot of hotels and parks.
And the longer those people sit, those industries sit without relief, the more likely that those big corporations have to end up with furloughs. I was just testing y'all earlier, Chance, to make sure you're ready for some muted mics in a little bit here at the debate. So now you should be good to go.
I was going to ask, is Kristen Welker in the control room? What's going on here? By the way...
Yeah, she's right over there. She did everything, I know.
I was really encouraged by the lady who said, yes, I'll accept the outcome no matter what it is because I believe in our systems, because so many people don't trust the systems anymore. I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of people say, no, I'm not going to accept the result. It's been a lot of, yeah, you know what, whether I like it or not, that's that.
It's good to hear. James Packard, People Not Pundits, thank you, sir. Just ahead, tonight's microphones, they do have a mute button intentionally. We're digging into how they work. How's it going to be different from last time? That's next. Back with you now on a special edition of Newsy Tonight. The second and final presidential debate is just a few minutes away. I'm looking at the live screen here because this is how you know it's really just a few minutes away.